Hi, I'm Ben Valak. So if you've got one of these Dyson fans that has the normal remote control here, so they're not the network enabled ones, they're just the normal ones with the infrared remote control, and you really want to be able to control them with Siri, this video will walk you through the whole process of coming up with a solution to make that work. You need two cheap additional things which you can pick up from Amazon. One is the Broadlink Mini RM3. I'll include a link to all this in the description. And the other is a Raspberry Pi Zero W, which is this little thing. And you can get the official case, which this sits inside. And you need a micro SD card here. And we're going to configure all of that via the Mac. Set it all up. I've got all the commands you need to issue, and I'll walk through the process of setting it all up. And once it's all done, it will show up in your Apple HomeKit apps, and you'll be able to use Siri to select on or off, turn on the oscillation, and set the fan to a certain % as well, and that'll all work. So the first thing we want to do is get the Raspberry Pi operating system onto this micro SD card. So we're going to put that onto the Mac. So I'm just using a little SD card adapter there onto the Mac. Next thing we're going to do is go ahead and download the Raspberry Pi software, which is this one here. You can click download zip, and you want the light version. So this link again is in the description here. So I've got that one already downloaded. The other thing we need is this app from this website. Again, links in the description. So I'm just going to click download on this and we'll grab that. So what we're going to be doing here is pretty geeky stuff. But what I've done is tested this whole setup out. I've worked out all the different commands that you need and the configuration that works with all these specific different things. So hopefully I'm going to simplify the process and make it easy for anybody who hasn't actually worked with this kind of stuff before. It is quite a fun thing to play with if you do fancy getting a bit more involved. There's lots of fun stuff you can set up with this, because this can control any infrared device. So that you can play with that later if you want, but we're just going to get this set up for this particular fan. I'll also include a configuration file that will control this one as well, but this walkthrough will be based on this one. Okay, so we've got these two downloaded now. So we're going to just double click this one and drag that into our applications folder. And we're just going to wait for that to finish. Okay, that's done. Now we can open the applications folder. I'm going to close that one. And we can open this app. So we click this blue button first of all where it says select image, and we're going to choose the light file that we downloaded for the Raspberry Pi operating system. Select target, we can choose the SD card that we've just mounted onto the Mac with the adapter. This is a 64 gig card, it's a bit overkill, it doesn't need to be that big at all. And then we do this, so this is going to reset everything, so it just wants you to enter your Mac password. And then we just wait for it to finish there, it doesn't take very long. Okay, so that's all done. So the SD card has now got the Raspberry Pi operating system on it. Okay, because the Raspberry Pi doesn't have a network connection on it, we need to actually get it set up to connect straight to the Wi-Fi network. So what we need to do is actually unplug the SD card and then plug it back into the Mac. We can eject that because we've done the install. And when we plug it back in, we get the little boot drive showing up here. So that's sort of the way the Raspberry Pi configures itself when it starts up. So we're going to open the terminal app now. So this is just this terminal app on the Mac. You can find it in your utilities folder, in your applications folder. And I'm going to type cd volumes boot. If you type it exactly as it is there, and then hit enter. Okay. Now I've got this little document which contains all the commands we need to use in this walkthrough, and we've done all that. So now we're going to go through to this. So this is the next one. So I'm just going to copy and paste these commands. So I'm literally copying from here, pasting into here, and then hitting return. Copy, paste, return. So what we've done here, this has made two files, and this has opened that file for editing. Now what you want to do here is edit this bit of text here to put your Wi-Fi name in it, and then this bit in between the quote marks you want to put your Wi-Fi password. And then we're going to copy that, And then the way we use this command line based text editor to paste text is actually we hit I on the keyboard first, and then we can paste. And then we hit escape, and then we just type colon, and then W, and then Q, and then hit return. So that saves that into that file. Okay, so I'm just going to close the terminal window, then hit eject on that. Alright, so now I can take the SD card out of the Mac, and we're going to plug it straight into the Raspberry Pi here. So there's a little SD card slot just in there, just goes in just like that, and then I'm going to pop it in its little case. Okay, so now it just needs power from the USB port, so we can connect that in there. Okay, so that's going to boot up. Actually, there is a little light you can check that it's kind of all working in there, and you'll see that flash as it boots up. It takes a little while to boot. It could take a minute or two to boot up. So while that's doing that, what we're actually going to do is connect the Broadlink Mini to the network as well. So you need your phone for this. So the app you need is called eControl. It is a rubbish app. It's only got 2 stars on here, but it does the job. It gets this connected. So when this is new, you see it's flashing the blue light on there. That means it's just waiting to connect to the network. So we can download the app on the phone. Then we're going to hit open. Skip. Okay, so it says add a device. It's already gone into that mode. Enter your Wi-Fi password. Okay. It's actually not very clear, but you've got to change the text in the first field to your Wi-Fi network name and put the password in the bottom bit. Okay, so that's finished this time. I've actually just did that twice, so I had to just unplug this and plug it back in again, and then I did the password thing, and it works. So this is now on the network. We don't need to look at this phone again. Okay, so let's go back to the Raspberry Pi setup. Okay, so now the infrared transmitter is on the network. The Raspberry Pi theoretically should be on the network. We haven't tested that, so that's what we're going to do now. So we did all the initial stuff, got the operating system on, configured it for Wi-Fi, and plugged it in. So what we're going to do now is just issue this command here, copy, paste, and hit enter. And it's the first time we've connected to it, so it asks if we want to add it. We just type yes and then hit enter again. And now it's asking for a password, and the default password for Raspberry Pis is raspberry. So we can do that. Typed it wrong first time. Okay, so now we're in, and if you read this text that it tells you here, it actually tells you to change the password. So that's exactly what we're going to do. So we just type passwd, hit enter, enter the current one again, which is raspberry. And then we can type in a new one, and again. Okay, so now when we issue this command in the future, we're going to need to type in our new password. So what we've done here is open the terminal, and when we typed the command starting with SSH, we've actually connected the Mac to the Raspberry Pi, and we're now actually operating the Raspberry Pi via its command lines. So now we're actually controlling the Raspberry Pi. We're connected to it. The commands we type now will actually control the Raspberry Pi. So now we just go through all of these commands here and basically get the Raspberry Pi set up. So this really, at this point, is just a question of copying and pasting each one of these commands one after the other. Every time you do one, you'll see it do something, like in this case it's downloading and installing. So this first one is just updating, and then once that's done you can go on to the next one. Whilst we're waiting for that, I'll just jump back to Safari and show you the things on Amazon. So this is the Raspberry Pi. That's the bit that we saw at the beginning. It's just the middle bit. It comes with this header already connected. Mine didn't. We don't need it for this, but I don't suppose having it on there makes any difference either. This is the case, obviously, that's sold separately, and this one, the one I got, actually came as a bundle, but that's okay. And then here's the little infrared transmitter. Okay, so back in the terminal we can see that it's finished that first command. So if we go back to our little sort of cheat sheet here, copy and paste the next one. So what I'm doing now is actually installing the Vim application on the Raspberry Pi, because it's the nicest way of sort of editing text files. It's handy to have it on the Raspberry Pi. So when you get a prompt like that, it just says, do you want to continue? You just type the Y and then hit return, and that confirms that. I'm going to copy the next command ready. Okay, that's ready, so we can go back to the terminal, paste that one, hit return. It's another one that needs confirmation, so we hit Y and enter. What usually I've put this in the documentation here when you're expecting a prompt like that. Alright, that one's done. Alright, that was a quick one. They get quicker now. So we can do copy and paste. Copy and paste. You notice I'm being careful to actually make sure I don't select the whole line, because that will automatically hit return, and it's nice just to be in control of when you hit return when you're pasting into the command line. So I'm just starting there and right to the end but no further. Alright, we can really blast through these. So this is another one that's going to need confirmation, so we're ready with the Y and enter. A few more here. Getting there now. This document is really daunting, but don't worry, it's just a question of keeping going with it. If you're ever not sure which one you just issued, you just push the up arrow key on your keyboard and you can go through all the previous ones. So that's your history there. So that was the last one. So I need to do this one next. Copy that, paste, that'll be a fast one. Copy that one, paste. Now we're going to go into, actually that should be Vim. Going to do that. Right, now we are going to copy and paste this bit right at the end of this file. So if we do Shift G, that moves the cursor down to the very bottom, and then we can actually just do O, which opens a new line below that, and then we can do paste. Hit escape, colon, WQ, enter. And then we carry on with the commands. Now this is the first one we're actually doing something to do with the HomeKit setup. Now we're installing the Homebridge plugin. If I just jump to the Homebridge website here, so this is the Homebridge system itself, which is an application that runs on the Raspberry Pi, and it's based around the idea of plugins. And the plugin we're going to use here is this one, which controls the infrared transmitter, and that has a configuration file which we're going to configure so that we can make it all work. This one might be a bit of a long one. In reality, this is probably taking me about half an hour now, but it's taken weeks of late nights trying to get all these commands together and make sure everything works. This next command, in fact, if you see here, I've got the version number at the end. The current version didn't seem to work. It threw an error when I installed it, so I went back to find the previous versions, and 355 seems to work fine. So we're going to install that now. So this is the Broadlink-rm plugin for Homebridge, which is here. Okay, there's a bit of configuration in these files which we're going to get from this link here. So I'm copying that one, pasting that in. So this is the first file that we put in here. So we're going to copy that, and then back in here we're in Vim again, so I push I and then paste, escape, and then I type colon WQ. Okay, so we're going to do that again with this one. That puts us in Vim, and we're going to paste in the second file that's shown here, but we do need to make a small change to this one. So paste, and I'm going to hit escape to come out of the insert mode, and then I'm going to move the cursor. I'm just using the arrow keys. Actually, you can actually use H, J, K, and L, which is a nice way of using Vim, but the arrow keys will work just fine if you're not familiar with it. So what we've got to do is actually change this bit here. So I'm going to push I to go into insert mode, and then just backspace to get rid of that, and then copy this path instead. So right, including the first slash there, right up to the end of Homebridge, but no further. Back in Vim, paste, hit escape, type the colon WQ again, and hit enter. Alright, now we carry on. Some quick commands again here. Literally just copying and pasting them all through. Right, okay, now it's going to get to the fun part. Okay, so what we need to do is actually send the configuration file into the right place. Now I've got the configuration file which you can download here. So this is the number you need to type in when you connect the thing to HomeKit. So you want to change that number to make sure no one else can actually get access to your infrared thingy and start making it do stuff all over the house. So this file I've got on my desktop here, so I downloaded it, put it on the desktop, and you can see there it is there in fact. So back in the terminal, I'm going to make a new terminal window with Command T, and I'm going to do CD, and then that character which takes us to the desktop if we do that. And what we need to do there is paste this. So what this is going to do is push that file which is here on the desktop in this location. It's going to push it to the Raspberry Pi, so we can hit enter there, and it's going to ask us for our password. So this is the password we saved when we first set the Raspberry Pi up. Okay, that's done. You can see the 100% there. So if we switch back, so this tab is the one we're in the Raspberry Pi, so we're issuing commands into the Raspberry Pi directly, and this one was our Mac, and that's where we pushed this file to the Raspberry Pi. So go back to our little instructions here. We've already got this tab open, so we don't need to connect to that again. But what we do need to do is move the file that we've just pushed into the Raspberry Pi to the right place. So we just issue that. Then we do this. Issue the last of these setup commands here. Then we can do that. Now if we run this one, we'll see the output of the Homebridge application running on the server, and that's what's going to show us if it's all working. So we're really fingers crossed here. Let's see what it says. So far so good. Yes, yes, yes. Excellent. So it's showing us the code there that we added. Well, it was the default one in the configuration file. Okay, so it's running basically. Now we want to just look for somewhere in here. It should say it's detected the broadlink-rm. Yes, there we go. So right at the bottom. So now we know that these are all working. Now what we've set up is actually a system where if you have a power cut, this will all recover by itself, but there's one small caveat, and that is if you have a power cut, they will come back online, but if this one comes back online slightly after the Raspberry Pi, it won't work. It won't, it'll appear as if it's there, but it won't send any signals. So what you've got to do after a power cut is just turn this off and then back on again. Right, so next thing is we're going to get the iPad and go into the Home app, and I'm going to hit plus, add accessory. Okay, so it's you can see me holding that now. So I'm going to hit this. I don't have a code and cannot scan, and you can see the Homebridge application is already actually there, visible. So we just tap it. It will give us this uncertified thing. Obviously, we're outside of the Apple system here, so we're going to get warnings. Luckily, they still allow this. I'm glad they do. So we're going to type that number in. It's all working. So far, so good. It's done. Yep, great. Okay, so now we're just going to run through. This is the scan frequency, so this is part of the Homebridge system. So we're just going to skip through that. We're going to go next. Default room, learn. So yeah, it can stay in the default room. These are all going in default room by default. That's fine. So this is the learn button. This is for later on. If you wanted to record your own remote commands, you can use that option. Now here we go. Here's the fan. So this is the fan that was configured in my sample configuration file, which is for this one here. I'm going to change this to the den so we can see it show up straight away. And we can click done. Tap. Okay, so where is it? There it is. Okay, so the interesting thing about all of this is because it's not proper HomeKit supported device, HomeKit won't actually know for sure the state of this device. So we've got to make sure they sort of start off in sync. So obviously when you first add this device to HomeKit, the fan is off. So we're going to make sure this is off. So I've just turned it off with this. Now, if I hit the fan button on HomeKit here, it turns on. So it's working. That's great. And turn it off again. Yep, super. So that's great. Now you can see the iPad has gone on to 100% by default. And obviously we can see it's only on 10%. So if I turn this up to 100%, this is just the process of getting it in sync that really belts it out. So now if I go into this and then tap a lower one here, we should see it go down. Right, that's all working really nicely. Interestingly, with that too close to the fan, it did seem to be confused as to how many signals it was being sent. So the way this actually all works, because obviously there is no specific infrared signal to say go to 30%, so we have to count down 9 times and then go back up 3 to get to 30%. So I've set all that up in the configuration file, and that's how we make it work. So it's working now. Just tap 20% on the iPad and it's gone to 20% there. And obviously the nice thing about this, particularly with the purifying fan, is I can use HomeKit to set up an automation that turns it off, say, an hour after I've gone to bed or whatever. So that's great. Okay, there we go. So it's all up and running. So I'm just going to go back to the Mac, which we've still got showing the output of the log, so you can see all that testing we just did was all showing up there. So if we do the learn, if I tap this learn button, this thing is listening for an infrared signal. So if I tap that, let's just do it, and then I'll just push volume up on this. Now if you look at the output of the log on the Mac, you can see it's actually recorded that code. So that number there we can actually use, and we can paste into this config file. Now this config file is a bit geeky, but it's all documented in this system here. This is the documentation for the homebridge-broadlink plugin, and you can go through and it tells you, it's a nice little documentation site actually, where it shows you how this config file structure works, and the codes, how they all work, and you can set it to send the code, then pause, then send another code, and that's what I've set up for the fan here. So you can see where I said the counting down and then back up. So here we've got fan speed 30, and it sends this number, this code 9 times, pauses, and then sends this one 2 times. So it goes down to 0, then 1, goes down to 1, sorry, then 2, then 3, with those 2 pulses of the power up command which I recorded, and that's the code for that. But that's in the sample file that you can download. So yeah, I think that's it. So it is possible. I've used this for a long time now. It works really well. I'm very happy with the setup. Considering it's not a proper certified system, it's pretty robust with this configuration. One of the key things was having it make sure it actually all comes back by itself after a power cut, because that was really annoying, having to connect to this over the command line to get things going again after a power cut. But the configuration we've gone through today should resolve all of that automatically, and it's kind of self-sufficient little setup. Okay, so that is about it. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up and let me know what you think in the comments as well. This is the first kind of video I've done like this, where I've gone into a lot of detail and set something up with some stuff you can download and all the rest of it. So hopefully it's been of use.